The knife bit into fabric. 1 inch, 2 inches. 3 men watching her uniform tear open while she stood frozen in that corridor. "Hold still," he whispered. "This is just a lesson." They thought she was paralyzed by fear. They thought her silence meant surrender. They thought the trembling in her hands was weakness. They were dead wrong. Because Specialist Kira Thornwood wasn't frozen, she was counting. 3 targets, 3 seconds, 3 broken bodies about to hit concrete. The knife cut deeper. She smiled. And then she moved, and every man in that corridor discovered what happens when predators corner a Navy SEAL. The phone rang at 0347 hours. Master Chief Samuel Brennan Ghost, to everyone who'd served with him, was already awake. 62 years old, and sleep had become a stranger that visited less and less. Too many memories. Too many faces. Too many operations that ended with folded flags and grieving families. He answered without looking at the screen. "Brennan. Ghost, it's Admiral Whitford. We have a situation." Ghost sat up in darkness, his body responding to that tone the way it had for 4 decades. That tone meant something was wrong. That tone meant someone needed help. "Talk to me." "Fort Resolute, Joint Training Command in Arizona. We've got a pattern ghost. 8 complaints in 2 years, 5 women transferred out, 3 careers destroyed, and every single complaint got buried by the same officer." Ghost's jaw tightened. "Who?" "Captain Roland Merritt, executive officer. He's been routing complaints through what he calls peer counseling sessions. Fancy way of saying intimidation until victims shut up." Why hasn't SOCOM moved on this silence on the other end? Then Whitford's voice heavier now. "Politics. Merritt has connections. Every time someone tries to investigate the file gets lost. Witnesses change their stories. Victims withdraw complaints. The system is protecting him, Ghost, and he knows it." Ghost walked to his desk, pulled open a drawer, found a photograph he'd looked at 1,000 times. His daughter Sarah, 23 years old, in dress uniform at her commissioning ceremony. Smiling, proud, full of hope for a career that would never happen. "You're calling me because this is personal. I'm calling you because you're the only one I trust to fix it. And yes, because I know what happened to Sarah. I know she was stationed at Fort Resolute 7 years ago. I know she filed a complaint. I know Merritt dismissed it. And I know she left the military 6 months later." Ghost's hand trembled. Just slightly. 40 years of combat had taught him to control fear, control rage, control everything. But this was different. "She never told me what happened. Not until last year. Not until she finally trusted me enough to say the words." "I'm sorry, Ghost. Don't be sorry. Give me authorization." "You have it. Full SOCOM backing. But we need proof that can't be buried. We need someone inside who can document everything, let them expose themselves, and then end it. Can you do that?" Ghost looked at another photograph on his desk. A young woman barely 19 standing at attention during her SEAL qualification ceremony. The youngest person to ever complete the program. The one he'd trained personally for 2 years. The one who reminded him so much of Sarah that sometimes it hurt to look at her. I know exactly who to send. The warehouse in Virginia Beach smelled like sweat and determination. Kira Thornwood moved through the combat drill like water through stone fluid, relentless, finding every gap. Her sparring partner, a 200-pound Marine named Sergeant Cole, threw a right hook. She slipped it, stepped inside his guard, and had him on the mat before he registered the movement. "Damn it, Thornwood," Cole groaned, staring at the ceiling. "That's the 5th time. 6th. She extended her hand, helped him up. "You telegraph your right. Shoulder drops before you throw." "How do you even see that?" I don't see it, I feel it. Rhythm changes. Breathing shifts. Your body tells me what you're going to do before you know you're going to do it. That's creepy as hell. She almost smiled. Almost. A voice from the doorway stopped her. Specialist Thornwood. She turned. Ghost stood there still in civilian clothes, but his posture screamed military. 40 years of service etched into every line of his face. Eyes that had seen Grenada and Desert Storm and Somalia and Fallujah and Afghanistan. Eyes that had watched friends die and enemies fall and systems fail the people they were supposed to protect. Master Chief, we need to talk. Privately. The briefing room was empty except for the two of them. Ghost laid a manila folder on the table. Thick, heavy, full of documents that represented destroyed lives. What is this? Kira asked. 8 women, Kira. 2 years. All stationed at Fort Resolute in Arizona. All filed complaints about harassment. All had those complaints dismissed by the same officer. 3 were transferred against their will. 2 were medically discharged for stress-related conditions. 1 attempted suicide. Kira's hands curled into fists. Slowly. Controlled. The way Ghost had taught her to control everything. And the other 2? Still there, still being targeted, still waiting for someone to believe them. She opened the folder. Read the first file. Private Zoe Castellan, 20 years old, filed complaint 4 months ago about Sergeant First Class Marcus Vane, Corporal Jace Hollister, and Private First Class Damon Reese. Complaint described systematic harassment, verbal intimidation, inappropriate physical contact, isolation tactics. Captain Merritt's response victim was emotionally unstable, misinterpreted professional mentorship, recommended she seek counseling for adaptation difficulties. They called her crazy. They called all of them crazy, or oversensitive, or unable to handle military culture. Whatever words worked to make the problem disappear without actually solving anything. Kira turned to the next file. Then the next. Then the next. 8 stories. 8 women. 8 variations of the same pattern: speak up, get dismissed, get destroyed. Her voice was quiet when she finally spoke. What do you need me to do? Infiltrate Fort Resolute as an anonymous integration officer. No rank visible, just a numbered armband. You'll be evaluating cross-branch training protocols, at least that's what your paperwork says. What you'll actually be doing is positioning yourself as a target. Bait. Yes. Kira looked at him. Really looked. Saw the tension in his jaw, the weight in his eyes. Something personal behind this mission. This isn't just about those 8 women, is it? Ghost was silent for a long moment. Then, 7 years ago, my daughter Sarah was stationed at Fort Resolute. She filed a complaint. Merritt dismissed it, said she misunderstood the situation. 6 months later, she left the military, left everything she'd worked for, everything she'd dreamed of. I didn't know you had a daughter. We don't talk about it. We barely talk at all anymore. Not because she's angry at me, because she's ashamed. She thinks she failed, thinks she wasn't strong enough. When the truth is, the system failed her. I failed her. I was overseas when it happened. Too busy saving strangers to protect my own daughter. Kira understood something then. Something fundamental about why Ghost had trained her so hard for 2 years. Why he'd pushed her beyond every limit. Why he'd believed in her when everyone else said a woman couldn't complete SEAL qualification. He wasn't just training an operator. He was creating the protector he wished Sarah had. I'll do it. Kira, I said I'll do it. When do I ship? 48 hours. Your cover credentials will be ready. You'll go in as Evaluation Officer 177. Low profile. Forgettable. Let them come to you. Let them commit. And when they cross the line, I show them what a Tier 1 operator looks like. Ghost nodded slowly. Rules of engagement: observe until they assault. Document everything. And when they do assault, because they will, you handle it your way. But make sure there are witnesses. Make sure nobody can call it a misunderstanding. There won't be any misunderstanding. She stood, moved toward the door, then stopped. Master Chief, after this is done, after we end them, what happens to the system that protected them? We burn it down and rebuild it right. Good. Her voice carried something cold, something certain. Because I was 17 when a recruiter cornered me and told me girls didn't belong in special forces. I made a choice that day. I chose to prove him wrong, but I shouldn't have had to make that choice. Nobody should. She left. Ghost sat alone in the briefing room, looking at the files, thinking about Sarah, thinking about Kira, thinking about 40 years of service that had taught him everything except how to protect the people closest to him. But this time would be different. This time he was sending a warrior who'd been forged in the same fire that had destroyed others. This time, the predators had no idea what was coming for them. Fort Resolute appeared through the Humvee windshield like a mirage in the Arizona desert. 600 acres of training yards, obstacle courses, combat simulation buildings, barracks arranged in perfect rows, everything regulation, everything squared away. On the surface, it looked like discipline order, the backbone of military excellence. Kira knew better. She'd spent 2 days memorizing every file, every complaint, every dismissed allegation. She knew the names of the predators, knew their patterns, knew the way they hunted as a pack: Vane, leading Hollister, providing muscle, Reese calculating angles and opportunities. She knew the name of their protector, Captain Roland Merritt, 44 years old. 3 combat tours. Decorated officer with connections reaching into Pentagon offices where careers got made or broken. And she knew the location where it always happened. The equipment bay on the eastern edge of the base. Blind corridor. No cameras. No witnesses. The perfect hunting ground for men who'd learned that the system would never hold them accountable. The Humvee stopped at the admin building. "This is you," the driver said without looking at her. "Check in at the front desk. They'll assign you quarters." Kira grabbed her duffel, stepped out into heat that pressed against her like an interrogation, and walked toward the building with the posture of someone trying not to be noticed. Forgettable. Invisible. Prey. Inside, a staff sergeant barely looked up from his terminal. "Name and assignment." "Thornwood, Anonymous Integration Officer, here for cross-branch evaluation." He typed, frowned at his screen, typed again. "I don't have you in the system." "SOCOM added me last minute. Check the supplemental roster." More typing. Then his expression shifted. Just slightly. The recognition that supplemental roster meant someone important wanted her here, and asking too many questions was a good way to make your own life difficult. "Found you. Evaluation Officer 177. You're in Barracks C-Rack 12. Formation at 0700 for PT evaluation. Don't be late." "I won't." She took her facility map, turned to leave, and felt eyes on her back. Not the staff sergeant. Someone else. Someone watching from the corner of the admin building's waiting area. She didn't look. Didn't acknowledge. Just walked out into the heat and headed for the barracks. But she'd seen him. Sergeant First Class Marcus Vane. Dark hair buzzed to stubble. Jaw like a cinder block. Eyes that tracked movement with predatory focus. He'd noticed her. Good. The barrack smelled like sweat and industrial cleaner. Kira found her rack middle bunk back corner and stowed her gear. Minimal kit. One change of uniforms. Toiletries. Nothing that suggested anything beyond another faceless officer doing time until rotation ended. But in the bottom of her duffel, wrapped in a towel, was her real equipment: encrypted satellite phone, micro recorder, digital camera with telephoto lens, and a black ID wallet she wouldn't need until the exact right moment. "You the new evaluator?" She turned. A young woman stood 3 racks down, 20 years old, blonde hair pulled back in regulation bun eyes, carrying the hollow weight of someone who'd stopped believing anyone would help. Private Zoe Castellan. "That's me," Kira said, kept her voice neutral, friendly but forgettable. "I'm Zoe. If you need anything, mess hall's to the left, heads to the right, and don't go to the equipment bay alone after 1800. Kira raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" Zoe's expression flickered. Fear. Then something else. The resignation of someone who'd tried to speak up and learned that speaking up only made things worse. "Just don't. Trust me." She walked away before Kira could ask anything else, but that brief exchange told Kira everything she needed to know. The pattern was still active. The predators were still hunting, and Private Zoe Castellan was still trapped in a system that had abandoned her, not for long. 0700 came with the Arizona sun breaking over the fence line like a threat. 60 personnel assembled for formation. Mixed unit Marines and sailors rotating through cross-branch integration training. The goal was building operational cohesion across service branches. The reality was friction competition and opportunities for predators to identify prey. Kira fell in with the middle of the pack. Not front where leaders stood, not back where strugglers hid. Just another body in the formation. Unremarkable. Forgettable. That's when she saw them. 3 men moving together with the coordination of a pack that had hunted before. Not officially paired, but orbiting each other with practiced precision. Vane in front, scanning the formation like a predator assessing a herd. Hollister to his left, 220 pounds of muscle that moved with deliberate heaviness. Reese trailing behind. Sharp eyes. The calculating one. The one who identified weaknesses before the others moved. Their attention swept across the formation. Paused on Kira. Dismissed her. Moved on. She felt that dismissal like confirmation. They didn't see her as a threat. They saw her as prey. Perfect. PT began with a 3-mile run, full combat load, 45 pounds of gear in heat that was already climbing toward triple digits. Kira kept pace with the middle of the pack. Not struggling. Not excelling. Just competent enough to avoid notice. Her breathing stayed steady. Her stride stayed economical. Conserving energy the way Ghost had taught her during their first desert training. Behind her, she heard heavy footsteps. Hollister. Not struggling, but working harder than necessary to maintain position near her rather than running his own pace. Tactical error, letting target selection override operational efficiency. He was already committed. The run ended. Kira finished in the middle third. Adequate. Unmemorable. She took water rehydrated properly and watched Vane approach Private Zoe Castellan, who'd finished near the back. "Struggling today, Private?" Vane's voice carried false concern, the kind of question designed to humiliate while sounding helpful. Zoe's face flushed. "No, Sergeant, just not maintaining standards." "I'll do better, Sergeant." Vane stepped closer, invaded her space. "That's a problem. Standards keep people alive. When you can't maintain them, you put everyone at risk." Zoe said nothing, but her hands clenched at her sides. And Kira saw something in her eyes that confirmed what the files had suggested. This wasn't the first time. This was pattern established and ongoing. Kira filed that observation, added it to the tactical picture, then turned away as if uninterested, as if she hadn't noticed, as if she wasn't cataloging every interaction for the moment when documentation would matter. The morning continued with weapons qualifications, M4 carbine, moving targets, stress fire exercises, the kind of shooting that required focus under pressure. Kira took her position on the firing line, loaded her magazine. The weapon felt familiar in her hand's extension of intention tool calibrated to purpose. The targets appeared, pop-up silhouettes at varying distances. She engaged, controlled pairs, center mass, rhythm-matching heartbeat. She scored 41 out of 50. Expert by Marine standards, but not exceptional, not memorable. What the instructors didn't see was that she'd deliberately missed 9 shots, grouped them in a pattern that looked like wind drift and stress rather than intentional placement. Because exceptional shooting would have raised questions, would have made her remarkable, would have broken her cover as just another integration officer. She needed them to keep underestimating her. For now, doubts. Midday brought the first escalation. Kira sat alone at a corner table in the mess hall. Ate quickly. Kept her head down. The universal signal of someone who didn't want attention. Vane walked past her table, deliberately bumped it with his hip, hard enough to rattle her tray but not hard enough to spill anything. He kept walking. Didn't look back. Didn't apologize. Testing. Kira said nothing, but her hand tightened on her fork for exactly 1 second before relaxing. Across the mess hall, she caught Zoe watching her. Fear in those young eyes. And something else, the desperate hope that maybe this new officer would be different. Maybe this one would see what was happening. Maybe this one would help. Kira gave nothing away. But inside, something cold and certain settled into place. These men had no idea who they were hunting. And by the time they found out, it would be far too late. The afternoon brought combatives training, Marine Corps martial arts program, level 3 techniques, grappling joint manipulation weapon retention, the kind of close-quarters combat where skill mattered more than strength. Kira was paired with Hollister. He outweighed her by 90 pounds, stood 6 inches taller, and when the instructor called engage, he came at her with confidence, bordering on arrogance. She let him take her down. Not dramatically, just allowed his weight advantage to work. Ended up on her back with him in mount position. He applied pressure. Not enough to hurt, just enough to dominate, to prove a point. Tap out, he said, grinning down at her. Not yet. She felt his weight shift, felt the change in his breathing, felt the moment when control became something else, satisfaction, dominance, the pleasure of having a woman beneath him. The instructor called, stop. Hollister stood, extended a hand to help her up. Kira stood without taking it. A subtle thing, but Hollister noticed. His eyes narrowed. You okay? He asked. False concern. The kind of question that wasn't really a question. Fine. They reset. Went again. This time Kira defended better. Not winning, just making him work for it, showing enough skill that he couldn't dismiss her entirely, but not so much that he'd recognize danger. After the 3rd round, Hollister was breathing hard. Kira's breathing remained steady. He noticed that. And something shifted in his expression. Confusion. The first crack in certainty. That evening, Kira made her first deliberate move. She walked to the equipment bay alone. Visibly alone. Moving with purpose, but no apparent awareness of vulnerability. Inside the bay, she browsed through gear, checked inventory, examined equipment, playing the role of integration officer, doing her job. She felt them before she saw them. Vane, Hollister, Reese. Entering the bay separately but converging, not surrounding her yet, just positioning, creating opportunity. They started a conversation among themselves, loud enough for her to hear, talking about the morning's PT, about weakness, about standards, about people who couldn't maintain them. The words were aimed at her without being directed to her. Psychological pressure, establishing dominance through proximity and implication. Kira finished her inventory check, turned to leave, found her path partially blocked. Not completely, just enough to make her navigate around them, to force close contact. She moved, chose her angle carefully, and as she passed, Hollister's shoulder bumped hers, harder than necessary. "Careful," he said, false apology. "Tight spaces." Kira said nothing, just kept walking. But she'd accomplished her objective. Pattern established. Opportunity created. Now they knew she went to the equipment bay alone, knew she was accessible, knew she was vulnerable. The trap was set. Now she just had to wait for them to walk into it. That night, encrypted call to Ghost. "Timeline accelerating," she reported. "They're faster than projected. Already testing physical contact. How are you positioned? Exactly where I need to be. They see me as prey. Isolated, vulnerable. They'll commit fully within 48 hours. Are you certain? They've done this before, Ghost. The pattern is established. They know what works, and they think this time will be exactly like the last 8 times. What's your read on Merritt? Haven't made direct contact yet, but his shadow is everywhere. The way complaints get buried, the way victims get dismissed. He's the architecture. They're just the execution." Silence on the line. Then Ghost's voice carrying something Kira rarely heard from him. Concern. "Kira, these men are dangerous. I know. Not because they're skilled, because they've been protected. They believe they're untouchable. That belief makes them overconfident, but it also makes them capable of anything. If you're wrong about the timing, I'm not wrong. If they escalate faster than projected, then I adapt. That's what you trained me from, Master Chief. That's what 2 years of SEAL qualification taught me. Adapt, overcome. And when the moment comes, execute with precision." Another silence. Longer this time. "Your grandmother, the one who trained guerrilla fighters in Vietnam, what did she always tell you?" Kira smiled in the darkness. The first real smile in days. "The fighter who moves first reveals. The fighter who moves second controls. Don't forget it. Let them reveal themselves completely. Let them commit beyond retreat. And then I control." "Exactly." Ghost's voice softened. 48 hours. I'll have response teams staged but invisible. When you're ready, when they've crossed the line, you'll have 60 seconds for intervention." "I won't need 60 seconds. How many? 3, maybe 4. That's my student." The call ended. Kira lay back in her bunk, staring at darkness running scenarios. 3 opponents. Coordinated but not trained for actual combat. Confident but not competent. Predators but not warriors. They thought they were hunting. They were wrong. And in 48 hours they would learn exactly how wrong they were. 3 seconds. That's all it would take to change everything. Day 2 began with heat that felt like punishment. Kira woke at 0500 an hour before required. Old habit. Her father used to say the early hours belonged to warriors, the quiet time when preparation happened, when advantages got built before anyone else was paying attention. She dressed in darkness, standard fatigues, boots laced tight, everything regulation, everything forgettable. But as she moved toward the barracks door, a voice stopped her. "You're up early." Zoe sat on the edge of her bunk, knees pulled to her chest, dark circles under her eyes. The look of someone who hadn't slept or couldn't sleep or was afraid of what sleep might bring. "Couldn't sleep," Kira said, kept her voice casual. "Me neither." Zoe's fingers twisted the edge of her blanket. "I never can anymore. Not since—" She stopped, shook her head. "Never mind." Kira should have walked away, should have maintained cover, should have stayed forgettable. Instead, she sat down on the bunk across from Zoe. Since what? Zoe looked at her. Really looked. Searching for something, judgment maybe, or disbelief, or the same dismissal she'd received from everyone else. 4 months ago, I filed a complaint about Sergeant Vane and his friends, about what they were doing to me. What happened? Captain Merritt called me into his office. Sat me down like we were going to have a real conversation. And then he told me I was mistaken, that I'd misinterpreted professional mentorship, that military culture required thick skin, and maybe I didn't have it. Kira's hands curled into fists beneath the shadow of the bunk. What did you say? What could I say? He's a captain. I'm a private. He had my file on his desk and he kept tapping it with his finger like he was reminding me how easy it would be to make my problems worse. So I nodded, said I understood, walked out of his office and cried in the latrine for an hour. And after that they got worse. Vane especially. He knows I reported him. He knows nothing happened to him. And now, Zoe's voice cracked. Now he wants me to know he's untouchable. He wants me to feel it every single day. Kira sat in silence for a long moment, thinking about Sarah Brennan, thinking about 8 files in a manila folder, thinking about a system that had failed so many women that failure had become policy. Zoe, look at me. The young woman raised her eyes. You weren't wrong. You weren't weak. And what happened to you wasn't mentorship. It was assault, and the man who dismissed you is going to answer for it. How do you know that? Because I'm going to make sure of it. Zoe stared at her, something shifting in her expression. Hope, maybe, or the fear that hope would only lead to more disappointment. Who are you really? Kira stood. Right now, I'm Evaluation Officer 177. But when this is over, when I have what I need, you'll find out exactly who I am. And so will they. She walked out before Zoe could respond. The sun was breaking over the eastern fence line. The heat was already building. And somewhere on this base, 3 predators were waking up, preparing for another day of hunting. They had no idea the hunt had already changed. The formation assembled at 0630. Earlier than usual. Surprise PT evaluation, the kind designed to catch people unprepared. Kira fell in with the others. Middle of the pack. Invisible. But today, Vane and his pack weren't behind her. They were directly beside her, close enough that she could smell Hollister's sweat. Close enough that Reese's shoulder brushed hers when the formation shifted. The circle tightening. Territory being claimed. Didn't see you at Chow last night, Vane said, not looking at her, speaking just loud enough that she could hear. Eating alone again? Kira said nothing. Noticed you went to the equipment bay, checking inventory. Still nothing. Vane smiled, that cold, patient smile of a predator who knew his prey had nowhere to run. Helpful of you. We like knowing where everyone is. Makes things easier. The formation began. 3-mile run in full combat load. Heat already pressing toward 90 degrees. Kira kept pace with the middle third. Steady breathing. Economical stride. letting them think she was just adequate, just forgettable, just prey. Behind her, she heard Hollister's heavy footsteps, matching her pace, staying close, testing, probing, confirming her as target. Let them confirm. The run ended. Kira finished without distinction, took water, stretched, watched. Vane approached Zoe again, the same pattern as yesterday, invading her space, false concern masking dominance. Better today, Private, but still not where you need to be. Zoe's jaw tightened. I'll keep working on it, Sergeant. Will you? Vane stepped closer, so close that Zoe had to lean back. Because I'm starting to wonder if you're capable of improvement. Some people just aren't built for this life. Some people are better off finding something else, something safer. His hand came up, touched her shoulder. Not gentle, claiming. Think about it. He walked away. Hollister and Reese following, the pack moving as one. Kira saw Zoe's hands trembling, saw her eyes go wet, saw her fight to hold back tears that wanted to fall. And she made a decision. Tonight, she would accelerate the timeline. The morning continued with tactical exercises, room-clearing drills, stacked entries, the kind of close-quarters work that required precise coordination. Kira was assigned to Reese's fire team. He positioned himself directly behind her in the stack, hands on her hips supposedly for tactical communication, actually for control, for testing, for reminding her that he could touch her whenever he wanted. Stay tight, he murmured, breath hot against her ear. Follow my lead. His fingers dug in, pressure that communicated ownership. Kira said nothing, did nothing. Let him think the contact went unnoticed. But inside she was counting, measuring, cataloging. Timestamp 0847. Location Training Building C. Contact type, inappropriate physical contact during training exercise. Witness potential. None direct others focused on drill. Another data point in the pattern she was building. After the drill, Reese lingered beside her. You did okay in there. Thanks. Could be better, though. Some of your movements are sloppy. Maybe I could show you some techniques, privately. Help you improve. His eyes held hers, the suggestion unmistakable. I'll manage, Kira said. You sure private instruction can make all the difference? Just ask Private Castellan. She learned a lot from our private sessions. The threat was implicit. The pattern was confirmed. They'd done this before. Many times. And they were about to do it again. To her. I'll think about it, Kira said, kept her voice uncertain, vulnerable. Reese smiled. You do that. He walked away, and Kira felt the timeline collapsing. They weren't waiting anymore. They were ready. Maybe tonight. Maybe tomorrow. But soon. She needed to be ready too. Midday mess was crowded. Noisy. The perfect cover for a conversation that couldn't be overheard. Kira found a seat near the back. Away from windows. Away from doors. Head down. Eating. Vane appeared at her table, sat down across from her without asking. Mind if I join you? You already did. He smiled. That cold, patient smile. Fair point. I like a woman who speaks her mind. Kira said nothing. Kept eating. You've been here 4 days now. Keeping to yourself mostly. Don't see you socializing much. That's unusual for an integration officer. Aren't you supposed to be evaluating how well we work together? I observe. From a distance. When necessary. Vane leaned forward. close enough that she could see the flecks of amber in his dark eyes, close enough that the smell of his sweat pressed against her. Here's what I think, 177. I think you're not just observing. I think you're watching. Specifically, like you're looking for something. Kira's heart rate didn't change. Her expression didn't shift. 12 years of training, all the way back to her grandmother's lessons in their garage, had taught her how to show nothing. I'm looking for integration issues. That's my job. Is it? Vane's smile widened. Because I've been doing some observation of my own, and you're interesting. The way you move, the way you carry yourself. There's something about you that doesn't quite fit the role. For a moment, Kira felt ice slide through her veins. Had she made a mistake? Had she revealed too much? But then Vane's hand reached across the table, touched hers. I like interesting women. They're more fun to get to know. Not suspicion. Interest. Predatory interest. She'd been afraid he was seeing through her cover. Instead, he was seeing exactly what she wanted him to see, a target worth pursuing. Maybe some other time, she said. Pulled her hand away. Not fast, that would be challenge. Just enough to be uncertain. Vulnerable. Soon, Vane said. Very soon. He stood, walked away. But his eyes never left her. Not until he reached the door. Kira finished her meal, kept her breathing steady. The trap was almost ready to spring. That afternoon she made a phone call. Encrypted line, secure channel. Ghost on the other end. They're accelerating, she said. Vane approached me at mess. Tested contact. He's ready to move. Timeline, tonight. Tomorrow at the latest. I'm going to give them the opportunity. Equipment bay. Same location as the Castellan incident. Same location as at least 3 others. They're creatures of habit. They'll use familiar ground. Silence on the line. Then Ghost's voice heavier now. Kira, when I trained you, I taught you to control engagement, to choose your moment, to never let the enemy dictate terms. They're not dictating. They think they are. But every move they've made, I've anticipated. Every position they've taken, I've allowed. This isn't their hunt, Ghost. It's mine. And if something goes wrong, then I adapt. That's what you trained me for. Another silence. Longer. Your father would be proud of you. Marcus Thornwood was the best operator I ever served with. And you're better. Kira closed her eyes. Felt the weight of that name. Felt the memory of a man who'd taught her to throw punches before she could read, who'd told her stories about honor and sacrifice, and protecting people who couldn't protect themselves, who'd died in Fallujah when she was 12, and left her with a legacy she'd spent every day since trying to honor. He taught me that real warriors don't prey on the weak. They protect them. That's what this is. Protection. Copy that. Response team will be in position by 1800. When you move, you'll have 60 seconds before intervention. I'll only need 3. I know, but the 60 seconds are for the witnesses. We need people to see the aftermath. We need the proof that can't be buried. Understood. One more thing, Kira. Merritt. He's the key. Take down his soldiers and you might hurt him. But take down his system, prove his pattern of protection, and you destroy him. I know what he did to Sarah. I know what he's done to all of them. When this is over, he's going to answer for every single one. Make sure of it. The call ended. Kira stood in the Arizona sun, felt the heat pressing down, felt the weight of what was coming. Tonight, everything changed. Sunset painted the desert in shades of blood and gold. Kira walked to the equipment bay at 1745. Early. Deliberate. Giving them time to position. Giving them time to believe this was opportunity rather than trap. Inside, she moved through the main storage area, past racks of gear, past rows of equipment, toward the eastern corridor where shadows gathered and cameras didn't reach. She felt them before she heard them. 3 heartbeats of warning. 3 sets of footsteps converging. Vane appeared at the corridor's north entrance, Hollister at the south. Reese behind her, cutting off retreat. Triangle formation. Practiced. Perfect. They'd done this before. "Well," Vane said. "Look who's here. All alone. Again." Kira turned slowly. Let them see her face. Let them see the fear she was faking. Wide eyes, shallow, breathing, the trapped animal tension of someone who'd just realized her mistake. "Sergeant, I was just what? Checking inventory at this hour in this location?" Hollister moved closer, his massive frame blocking what little light reached this corner. "I think she came here looking for something," he said. "Maybe she found it." Reese circled behind her. Close. Too close. She could feel his breath on her neck. "She's been watching us," Reese said. "All week. Thought she was being subtle. Thought we didn't notice." Kira's heart pounded. Not from fear, from anticipation. This was it. The moment everything she'd built collapsed into 3 seconds of controlled violence. But not yet. Not until they crossed the final line. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, voice shaking. Selling the fear. "I'm just an evaluation officer. I'm just doing my job." "Your job." Vane stepped closer, close enough that she could see the hunger in his eyes, the certainty of a predator who knew his prey had nowhere to run. "Here's what I think your job is. I think you came here to learn something. And we're going to teach you." "Please, please what? Please stop. Please don't." Vane smiled. Cold. Patient. "You know what I've learned in 10 years of military service? Nobody stops. Nobody cares. The system protects people like me. And people like you." He reached out, grabbed her uniform collar, pulled her close. "People like you disappear." Kira felt his grip tighten, felt Hollister move behind her, felt Reese's hand touch her hip. One more line. Just one more. "Let me go." "Or what?" Reese pulled out a knife. Training blade. Rubberized. The same kind that had been used before. The same ritual. "Your uniform's not regulation," Reese said. "Let's fix that." The blade pressed against her shirt, started to cut. And in that moment, that precise, calculated moment, Kira Thornwood stopped being prey. Her right hand snapped to Reese's wrist. Nerve strike. Surgical precision. His fingers spasmed. The knife clattered to concrete. Before it stopped bouncing, her palm drove into his chin, angle calculated for maximum disruption to equilibrium. His head snapped back. His body followed. Hip rotation, weight transfer, judo throw that used his own momentum. Reese hit the ground, hard, wind expelled, consciousness flickering. 1.9 seconds. Hollister roared. Charged. 220 pounds of muscle aimed at overwhelming. Kira flowed with his momentum, arms around his neck, modified chokehold, not to cut off air, to control position. Her other hand drove his elbow toward hyperextension. The joint stressed beyond tolerance. Pop. Hollister screamed, went down. Face first, arm locked, shoulder compromised. 3.8 seconds. Vane lunged for the knife. Kira's boot intercepted, pinned his hand to concrete with precision that came from 10,000 hours of training. He tried to rise. Her sweep took his legs. Knee to ground. Full mount. Forearm across throat. "Done?" she asked, breathing steady, heart rate barely elevated. Vane's eyes were wild, confusion replacing certainty. His mouth worked. No words came. I asked if you're done. Who? He gasped. Who the hell are you? Footsteps, multiple sets, running, right on schedule. MPs burst into the corridor, Gunnery Sergeant Rivera in the lead. 2 corporals behind, weapons drawn. They saw 3 men on the ground, one gasping, one cradling his arm, one staring at the ceiling like he'd seen his own death, and one woman standing in the middle, torn shirt, steady breathing, eyes that held nothing but absolute certainty. Commander, Rivera started. Kira reached into her pocket, produced the black ID wallet, opened it. Rivera read. His face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Then he said the words that changed everything. Specialist Kira Thornwood, Naval Special Warfare, SEAL Team, Tier 1 clearance, SOCOM attached. The corridor went dead silent. Vane's face went white. Because those words, Tier 1 SOCOM SEAL, they meant the woman he'd cornered wasn't prey. She never had been. These 3 are in custody pending investigation, Kira said. Medical isolation. No communication. And Sergeant, I need you to get me Captain Merritt. Right now. Rivera nodded, started issuing orders. But Kira wasn't watching him. She was watching Vane. Watching the realization spread across his face. Watching him understand that everything he'd believed about power and protection and immunity had been illusion. The hunt was over. And for the first time in his miserable life, Sergeant First Class Marcus Vane knew exactly what it felt like to be prey. Captain Roland Merritt arrived 17 minutes later. Kira watched him walk into the equipment bay with the measured stride of a man who believed he controlled every situation. 44 years old, 3 combat tours, medals and citations and commendations that painted a picture of service and sacrifice, all of it a mask for something rotten. What the hell is going on here? Merritt's voice carried command authority, the tone of someone accustomed to asking questions and receiving immediate answers. Rivera, I want a full report, now. Sir, we have 3 personnel in custody. Assault charges pending. And assault on whom? Rivera hesitated. Looked at Kira, then back at Merritt. On her, sir. Merritt's eyes found Kira for the first time. Took in the torn uniform, the steady posture, the complete absence of fear in her expression. You're the integration officer, 177. Was. Excuse me. Kira stepped forward. Produced the black ID wallet again. Held it open so Merritt could read every word. Specialist Kira Thornwood, Naval Special Warfare, SEAL Team, Tier 1 clearance, SOCOM attached. And as of 18 minutes ago, lead investigator for Operation Clean House. Merritt's face didn't change. Not visibly. But something shifted behind his eyes. The first crack in certainty. I don't know what you think you're doing, Specialist, but this is my base. Any investigation goes through my office. Not this one. Every investigation, Captain. Kira's voice cut through his like a blade. In the last 18 months, 8 women under your command filed formal complaints about harassment and assault. You dismissed every single one, called them oversensitive, told them they'd misunderstood, recommended they seek counseling for adaptation difficulties, and every single time the perpetrators walked free while the victims had their careers destroyed. Merritt's jaw tightened. Those complaints were handled according to protocol. Your protocol, not military justice. Your personal system for making problems disappear. I don't have to listen to this. Yes, you do, because I have documentation, audio recordings, testimony from multiple victims, a pattern so clear that even Pentagon lawyers won't be able to bury it. And in approximately, she checked her watch, 4 hours a SOCOM investigation team will arrive to begin formal proceedings. For the first time, something like fear flickered across Merritt's face. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Kira pulled out her encrypted phone, pulled up a file. Hit play. Merritt's own voice filled the corridor. "Private Castellan, I understand you're upset, but you need to consider what filing this complaint will do to your career. These are good Marines you're accusing, men with families, men who serve their country. Are you really sure you want to destroy their lives over a misunderstanding?" The recording continued. Every word, every implicit threat, every careful manipulation designed to make a victim feel like she was the problem. Merritt's face went white. "Where did you get that?" "Zoe Castellan recorded it. 4 months ago when you convinced her to withdraw her complaint. She kept it because she knew someday someone might actually listen. That recording is inadmissible. She had no right. She had every right. She was protecting herself from a system that had already failed her, and now that recording along with 7 others just like it is going to end your career." Merritt took a step toward her. Aggressive, threatening. "You don't know who you're dealing with. I have friends in the Pentagon, people who will make this entire investigation disappear before breakfast." Kira didn't move, didn't flinch. "You had friends, past tense, because for the last 3 months, Colonel Samuel Brennan has been systematically briefing every one of your contacts on the evidence we've compiled. Your protection network is gone, Captain. You just don't know it yet." The name hit Merritt like a physical blow. "Brennan Ghost, Brennan." "Master Chief Brennan, my commanding officer, and the father of Lieutenant Sarah Brennan, whom you dismissed 7 years ago when she filed a complaint about this exact same pattern." Merritt's mouth opened, closed, opened again. That situation was different. Was it Sarah Brennan reported harassment by 3 Marines under your previous command? You told her she'd misunderstood. You recommended counseling. You protected the perpetrators. And 6 months later, she left the military. Left everything she'd worked for. Left because you made her believe she was the problem. I was following protocol. You were following convenience. And it worked. For 7 years it worked. Until now. Kira stepped closer. Close enough that Merritt had to look down to meet her eyes. Close enough that he could see exactly what she was: not a victim. Not a problem to be managed, but a reckoning that had been 40 years in the making. "Here's what happens next, Captain. You're going to be placed under administrative restriction pending investigation. You're going to watch as every complaint you buried gets reopened. You're going to see every victim you silenced finally get heard. And when the court-martial is finished, and there will be a court-martial, you're going to spend the rest of your life knowing that you destroyed dozens of careers and ruined countless lives because protecting predators was easier than prosecuting them." "You can't. I already have." Rivera stepped forward. 2 MPs behind him. "Captain Merritt, you're hereby relieved of command pending SOCOM investigation. Please surrender your sidearm and accompany these officers." For a long moment, Merritt didn't move. His eyes locked on Kira's, searching for weakness, searching for doubt, searching for any crack in her certainty that he could exploit. He found nothing. Slowly he removed his sidearm, handed it to Rivera. Let the MPs take position on either side of him, but as they led him away, he spoke one final time. "This isn't over, Specialist. You have no idea what you've started." Kira watched him go. Then she pulled out her phone and made a call. "Ghost, Merritt is secured. Vane Hollister and Reese are in custody. The base is yours." On the other end, 40 years of military service exhaled in relief. "Well done, Kira. Well done." The next 3 hours moved fast. Ghost arrived by helicopter at 2100. Behind him, a full SOCOM investigation team, 12 specialists, trained to dismantle exactly this kind of institutional failure. Kira met him on the landing pad. The desert wind whipped around them, carrying heat and dust, and the weight of everything that had happened. "You look like hell," Ghost said. "Torn uniform. Didn't have time to change." "Keep it. Evidence." They walked toward the admin building. Ghost's stride was slower than it used to be. 62 years had taken their toll, but his eyes were sharp, focused. The eyes of a man who'd spent 40 years waiting for this moment. "Merritt's claiming selective prosecution," Kira reported. "Says he was following established protocol. Says the complaints were handled according to regulation." "He's lying. I know, but he's good at it. 44 years of practice." Ghost stopped walking, turned to face her. "7 years ago when Sarah told me what happened, I wanted to kill him. Not metaphorically, actually, kill him. Walk into his office, put a bullet in his head, and accept whatever consequences came." "Why didn't you?" "Because that would have been justice for me. Not for her, not for the others. Real justice. The kind that changes systems instead of just punishing individuals takes longer. It requires patience, evidence, the willingness to build a case so complete that even institutional inertia can't dismiss it. 40 years of patience. 40 years of preparation. Every lesson I ever taught you about waiting, about control, about striking at exactly the right moment, I learned them because I knew someday I'd need them. Someday the opportunity would come to tear down people like Merritt. And when it came, I needed to be ready." Kira understood. More than she could say. "Sarah. Does she know?" "I called her before I flew out. Told her what you did, what's coming." "What did she say?" Ghost's voice cracked. "Just slightly. Just enough." She cried. First time in 7 years. But these were different tears. Not shame. Not regret. Relief. The kind of relief that comes when someone finally believes you. They started walking again. The admin building loomed ahead. "The investigation team wants to interview you first," Ghost said. "Full debrief. Every detail of the last 4 days. And after that? After that, we start interviewing victims. Every woman who filed a complaint. Every woman who was transferred or discharged or driven out. We find them. We listen to them. We let them tell their stories to people who will finally believe them." "How many?" "My estimate 15 at this base alone. Probably triple that across Merritt's entire career." Kira felt the weight of that number settle on her shoulders. 45 women. 45 lives derailed or destroyed. 45 stories that had been dismissed and buried and forgotten. Until now. "Then we'd better get started." The interview room felt smaller at night. Kira sat across from Colonel Diana Vasquez, 3-star general, and head of SOCOM oversight. Vasquez had been Ghost's student 30 years ago, Desert Storm, before Kira was born. Now she commanded the investigation that would determine everything. "Walk me through it again," Vasquez said. "From the moment you arrived on base." Kira recounted everything. The harassment. The escalation. The pattern she'd observed and documented. The moment in the corridor when 3 predators had surrounded her, believing they were untouchable. And your response? Standard SEAL neutralization techniques. Nerve strike to force weapon release. Palm strike to disrupt equilibrium. Joint manipulation to control secondary threats. Total engagement time 4.2 seconds. Any permanent injuries? Corporal Hollister has a dislocated shoulder. The others sustained minor trauma consistent with hand-to-hand combat. Nothing that won't heal. Vasquez made notes. Her face revealed nothing. Some people will say you used excessive force. Some people weren't there. The defense will argue that you engineered this situation, that you deliberately positioned yourself as a target to justify violent response. I positioned myself as available. They chose to assault me. The engineering was theirs, a system of predation they'd been perfecting for years. I just gave them an opportunity to demonstrate it to witnesses. And the recordings, the documentation. Kira produced her encrypted phone, pulled up files, timestamps, audio, photographs. 4 days of evidence compiled with the precision of an intelligence operative. Everything they did, everything they said, every moment of escalation, documented and verified. Vasquez scrolled through the files. Her expression shifted from professional neutrality to something harder, angrier. Merritt knew. He had to know. He didn't just know. He facilitated. The recordings from victims show him coaching perpetrators on how to avoid documentation, advising them on which targets were vulnerable, creating the conditions for assault while maintaining plausible deniability. That's conspiracy to commit sexual assault, multiple counts. At minimum. Vasquez set down the phone, looked at Kira with eyes that had seen 30 years of military service and still hadn't grown numb to injustice. You're 19 years old. Yes, ma'am. Youngest SEAL in history, and in 4 days you dismantled a predatory system that's been operating for over a decade. I had help. Ghost built the case. I just executed the operation. Don't minimize what you did. Vasquez's voice carried weight. Command authority, but also respect. I've been fighting this kind of rot for 30 years, watching good people get destroyed while predators got promoted, feeling powerless against a system that protected the wrong people. What you accomplished in 4 days, that's more than most officers achieve in entire careers. Kira said nothing, didn't know what to say. There's going to be pushback, Vasquez continued. Pentagon brass who think this kind of investigation makes the military look bad. Politicians who'd rather bury the story than address it. Defense attorneys who'll try to paint you as the aggressor and those 3 predators as victims of overzealous prosecution. I know. Are you ready for that? Kira thought about her grandmother. A Vietnamese refugee who'd trained guerrilla fighters and then rebuilt her life in America. Who'd taught her granddaughter that patience was a weapon and silence was a strategy, and real strength meant protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. She thought about her father, Marcus Thornwood, Force Recon Marine, killed in Fallujah when she was 12, who'd died believing that honor and sacrifice meant something, that the uniform stood for protection, not predation. She thought about Sarah Brennan, and Zoe Castellan, and 8 other women whose files she'd memorized, whose stories she carried. I've been ready my whole life. Vasquez nodded slowly, something like approval in her eyes. Then let's finish this one. The first victim interview happened at 0300. Staff Sergeant Rebecca Okonkwo, 31 years old. Transferred from Fort Resolute 14 months ago after filing a complaint that Merritt had dismissed. Currently stationed in Germany, connected via secure video link. Kira sat beside Vasquez, watching, learning. Staff Sergeant, Vasquez began, I want you to know that this conversation is being recorded for official proceedings. Everything you say will be part of the formal investigation. Do you understand? On the screen, Okonkwo nodded. Her face carried the hollow weight of someone who'd stopped believing anyone would help, but also something else, something fragile. Hope, maybe. Or the fear that hope would only lead to more disappointment. I understand, ma'am. Tell us what happened. Okonkwo's story took 47 minutes. Harassment that started small comments looks accidental contact during training, then escalated isolation tactics threats disguised as mentorship. the slow, grinding pressure of being made to feel crazy for noticing what was happening. I filed a formal complaint after Sergeant Vane cornered me in the equipment bay. He said, her voice cracked. He said I needed to learn my place, that the military wasn't for women who couldn't handle attention from real men, that if I reported him, nobody would believe me anyway. And then, Captain Merritt called me into his office. He had my file on his desk, my whole career spread out in front of him, and he told me that filing complaints was a serious matter, that false accusations could destroy good Marines, that I should think carefully about whether I wanted to ruin 3 men's lives over what was probably just a misunderstanding. Kira's hands curled into fists beneath the table. What did you say? I said it wasn't a misunderstanding. I said I knew what happened. And he said, Okonkwo's eyes went wet. He said that knowing and proving were different things, that he'd reviewed my service record and found some concerning patterns, adaptation difficulties, interpersonal conflicts. He said if I pursued the complaint, those patterns would become part of my permanent file. But if I withdrew it, he'd make sure my transfer request went through immediately. He threatened your career. He ended my career. Even after I transferred, the reputation followed me. Difficult, oversensitive, not a team player. I've been passed over for promotion 3 times, and I know it's because of what he put in my file. The interview continued. More details, more documentation, more evidence of a system designed to protect predators by destroying victims. When it was over, Vasquez ended the connection gently. Promised follow-up. Promised that this time someone would listen. Then she turned to Kira. That's one. We have 14 more at this base alone, and probably 40 more across Merritt's career. How do you do this? Kira asked. The words came out before she could stop them. How do you listen to story after story and not lose hope, not become numb, not want to kill someone? Vasquez smiled. Cold, understanding. Some days I do want to kill someone. Some days I want to walk into a room full of predators and make them feel exactly what their victims felt. Powerless, trapped, terrified. But you don't. No, because killing them would end their suffering. And I don't want their suffering to end. I want it to continue. I want them to spend decades knowing that their careers are over, their reputations are destroyed, their freedom is gone, all because they believed they were untouchable and they were wrong. Kira understood. More than she wanted to. Justice instead of vengeance. Justice is vengeance, just slower and more complete. The door opened. An aide entered with a folder. General, you need to see this. Vasquez took the folder. Read. Her expression went from tired to electric in 3 seconds. When did this arrive? 20 minutes ago. Courier delivered it to the main gate. No return address, no identification. What is it? Kira asked. Vasquez handed her the folder. Inside a USB drive, a handwritten note, and 4 photographs that made Kira's blood run cold. The note read, I couldn't fight when it happened, but I kept everything. This is what you need to finish it. Make sure he never does this again. BC. Brenna Castellan, Zoe's older sister, who'd served at Fort Resolute 5 years ago, who'd filed a complaint, who'd been medically discharged for stress-related conditions. The photographs showed Merritt, with Vane, with Hollister, with Reese, in situations that couldn't be explained away as mentorship or professional interaction. And the USB drive, when they plugged it in, contained audio recordings, dozens of them. Merritt coaching his predators, teaching them how to select targets, how to isolate victims, how to create pressure without leaving evidence. My God, Vasquez whispered. Kira stared at the screen, at evidence that transformed this from isolated incident to systematic conspiracy. She kept it. For 5 years she kept everything, waiting for someone to finally listen. This changes everything. This isn't just harassment. This is organized predation spanning multiple years, multiple victims, multiple perpetrators, all coordinated by a commanding officer. Federal charges. At minimum. Merritt's looking at 20 years. Maybe more. Kira thought about Brenna Castellan. About what it must have cost her to save this evidence, to hold on to it for 5 years, to believe that someday, somehow, it would matter. We need to find her. Tell her it worked. Tell her she was right to hold on. Vasquez nodded. First thing in the morning. But Kira was already reaching for her phone. Some messages couldn't wait until morning. The call connected at 0347. Brenna Castellan's voice was hoarse, tired. The voice of someone who'd been woken from sleep, but hadn't really been sleeping, not truly, not peacefully for 5 years. Who is this? My name is Kira Thornwood. I'm a Navy SEAL attached to SOCOM, and I'm calling because we received your package. Silence on the other end. Long. Heavy. Then, you actually opened it. We opened it. We listened to every recording. We looked at every photograph. And I'm calling to tell you that it worked, Brenna. Everything you saved. Everything you held on to. It's going to destroy him. A sound came through the phone. Something between a laugh and a sob. 5 years. I kept that USB drive in a safety deposit box for 5 years. Every month I'd go check on it. Make sure it was still there. Make sure I hadn't imagined the whole thing. And every month I'd think about sending it to someone. But I never knew who to trust. What changed? My sister called me yesterday. Zoe. She told me what happened. She told me about you. About what you did to those 3 men. About how you stood in that corridor and took them apart in 3 seconds. Brenna's voice cracked. She said for the first time since she filed her complaint, she actually believed someone might listen. Kira closed her eyes, felt the weight of that trust settle on her shoulders. We're listening now, Brenna. And we're not going to stop until every person responsible for what happened to you and Zoe and everyone else pays for it. Merritt, he's the one. He trained them. He protected them. He built the whole system. We know. And we have him. Another silence. Then Brenna asked the question that mattered most. What happens next? Court-martial. Federal charges. Prison sentences. But more than that, systemic change, new protocols, new oversight, a complete restructuring of how harassment complaints get handled. What happened to you is never going to happen to anyone else. Not if I can help it. You're 19 years old. Zoe told me. 19. How does a 19-year-old take down a system that's been protecting predators for decades? Kira thought about her grandmother. Her father. Ghost. Sarah Brennan. Every person who'd taught her that real strength meant protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. I had help. A lot of it. People who've been fighting this fight longer than I've been alive. I'm just the one who got to finish it. No. Brenna's voice was stronger now. Clearer. You're the one who was brave enough to walk into that corridor and let them come for you. You're the one who risked everything so people like me could finally be heard. Don't minimize that. Don't ever minimize that. Kira didn't know what to say, so she said the only thing that mattered. Thank you for holding on. For 5 years you kept that evidence safe. You believed that someday it would matter, and you were right. I almost deleted it. 100 times. Every time I thought about what they did to me, I wanted to erase everything and pretend it never happened. But something stopped me. What? Anger. Not the hot kind that burns out fast. The cold kind that sits in your chest and waits. I knew that someday, somehow, there would be a reckoning. And when it came, I wanted to be ready. Kira understood. More than Brenna could know. The reckoning is here. And you made it possible. The court-martial proceedings began 3 weeks later. Military courtroom. Formal setting. Everything regulation, everything squared away. But underneath the surface tension crackled like electricity before a storm. Kira sat in the front row. Witness. Investigator. The woman who'd started everything. Beside her ghost. 62 years of service etched into his face, but his eyes were sharp, focused, fixed on the man being escorted to the defendant's table. Captain Roland Merritt looked different in chains, smaller somehow. The command authority that had defined him stripped away, leaving only the hollow shell of a man who'd believed he was untouchable and discovered he was wrong. Behind him at a separate table sat Vane Hollister and Reese, 3 predators who'd spent years hunting without consequence. Now facing consequences they'd never imagined possible. The military judge, Colonel Patricia Hammond, called the proceedings to order. Captain Roland Merritt, you are charged with conspiracy to commit sexual assault, obstruction of justice, abuse of authority, and conduct unbecoming an officer. How do you plead? Merritt's attorney, a civilian lawyer with a reputation for getting guilty officers acquitted, stood. Not guilty, Your Honor. My client maintains that all complaints were handled according to established protocol, and that this prosecution represents selective targeting based on save it for trial counselor. Hammond's voice cut like steel. I've read the evidence, all of it, including the audio recordings that show your client actively coaching subordinates on how to assault women without leaving documentation. If you have a defense beyond he didn't do it, I suggest you find it quickly. The attorney sat down, said nothing. Kira felt Ghost tense beside her, saw his hands curl into fists on his thighs. You okay? She whispered. 7 years. I've waited 7 years for this moment, and now that it's here, it doesn't feel like enough. No, it doesn't. Nothing will ever be enough. Not for Sarah, not for the others. But this, he looked at Merritt, at the chains, at the fear finally showing in those arrogant eyes. This is a start. The prosecution began with documentation. 3 hours of evidence, audio recordings, photographs, testimony from investigators, a paper trail that showed exactly how Merritt had built his system of protection and how thoroughly it had failed the women it was supposed to protect. Then came the witnesses. Staff Sergeant Rebecca Okonkwo was first. 14 months since her transfer. 14 months of carrying the weight of what had happened and what had been done to silence her. Staff Sergeant, the prosecutor began, please describe for the court what occurred on the night of March 17th, 2 years ago. Okonkwo's voice was steady, strong, the voice of someone who'd been waiting a long time to tell her story to people who would finally listen. I was working late in the equipment bay, conducting inventory for an upcoming exercise. Sergeant Vane entered around 2100 hours. He was alone. What happened next? He approached me, said he'd noticed I was having trouble with some of the training exercises, offered to help, said he knew techniques that could improve my performance. And did you accept his offer? No, I told him I was fine, that I needed to finish my work. He didn't listen. What did he do? He grabbed my arm, pulled me toward him, said I needed to learn that when a senior NCO offered help, I should accept it. Said refusing showed a lack of respect for rank and authority. And then, Okonkwo's jaw tightened, but her voice didn't waver. He pushed me against the equipment rack, put his hand on my throat, told me he could teach me a lot of things if I let him, and that if I didn't, if I made this difficult, he had friends who could make my life very unpleasant. What did you do? I froze. I wanted to fight. I wanted to scream, but I was afraid. He was bigger than me, stronger, and I knew that even if I got away, nobody would believe me. Because that's what everyone said. That nobody believes women who complain, that the system protects men like him. The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that carries weight. How did the encounter end? Another Marine entered the bay. Sergeant Vane let me go. Pretended nothing had happened. Walked away like it was nothing, like I was nothing. And what happened when you reported the incident? Okonkwo looked directly at Merritt, her eyes burning with something that had been suppressed for 14 months. Captain Merritt called me into his office, told me I'd misunderstood a friendly offer of mentorship, said I was being oversensitive, said if I pursued the complaint he'd have to document my performance issues in my permanent file. She paused. He destroyed my career to protect a predator, and he did it with a smile. The testimony continued. 8 more witnesses. 8 more stories of harassment and assault and institutional betrayal. Private First Class Maria Santos, who'd been cornered by Hollister during a night exercise and told that complaining would end her career before it started. Corporal Jennifer Wright, who'd reported Reese for inappropriate contact and found her evaluation scores mysteriously dropping in the weeks that followed. Sergeant Lisa Park, who'd witnessed multiple incidents and tried to report them only to be transferred to a remote posting where her testimony couldn't interfere with Merritt's protection system. Story after story. Voice after voice. Women who'd been silenced, finally speaking. Women who'd been dismissed, finally being believed. By the time the prosecution rested, even Merritt's attorney looked defeated. But the defense had one strategy left. The defense calls Captain Roland Merritt. Merritt took the stand, his face composed, his voice steady, the mask of authority firmly in place. Captain Merritt, his attorney began, you've heard the accusations against you. How do you respond? These accusations are the result of a coordinated campaign to destroy my career and reputation. I have served this country for 44 years, 3 combat tours, numerous commendations, and now because I followed established protocol in handling complaints, I'm being portrayed as a monster. Did you dismiss legitimate complaints? I evaluated complaints according to military regulation. Many of the accusations brought to my attention were vague, unsupported by evidence, and contradicted by other witnesses. My duty was to protect the accused, as well as the accuser. That's what I did. What about the audio recordings? Your voice is clearly identifiable coaching subordinates on how to avoid documentation. Merritt's expression didn't change. Those recordings were edited, taken out of context. I was providing guidance on proper documentation procedures, not teaching anyone to avoid accountability. Kira felt her jaw tighten, felt the rage building in her chest. But she'd been trained for this, trained to wait, to let the enemy commit, to strike only at the exact right moment, and the prosecution had prepared for exactly this defense. No further questions. The prosecutor stood, approached the witness stand with the calm confidence of someone holding a winning hand. Captain Merritt, you claim the audio recordings were edited, taken out of context. That's correct. Then perhaps you can explain this recording, which our technical analysts have confirmed is unedited and complete. She pressed play. Merritt's voice filled the courtroom. Listen to me carefully, Marcus. Women like Castellan are problems. They see harassment where none exists. They make accusations because they can't handle real military culture. Your job is to make her understand that complaining is more trouble than it's worth. Don't touch her, that leaves evidence. Just make her feel isolated. Make her feel crazy. Make her believe that nobody will ever take her side. Eventually she'll stop talking. They always do. The recording continued for 3 more minutes. Explicit instructions on psychological intimidation. Detailed guidance on destroying victims without leaving physical evidence. A masterclass in predation disguised as military mentorship. When it ended, the courtroom was silent. Merritt's face had gone white. "Captain Merritt," the prosecutor said, "would you like to explain how that recording was taken out of context?" He said nothing. "Would you like to explain how you were simply providing guidance on proper documentation procedures?" Still nothing. "Captain Merritt, you spent 44 years building a system that protected predators and destroyed victims. You coached men on how to assault women without consequences. You threatened careers to silence complaints. And you did it all while wearing the uniform of the United States military. A uniform that is supposed to stand for protection, not predation." She turned to the judge. "The prosecution rests." Closing arguments were brief. The defense tried to salvage something, argued that Merritt was a victim of changing standards, that what was acceptable decades ago was being judged by today's rules. The prosecution didn't even bother responding to that argument, just played one more recording. Merritt's voice, recent, clear. "The trick is choosing the right targets. Women who are isolated, women who won't be believed, women whose careers are vulnerable. Those are the ones who stay quiet. Those are the ones who disappear." The jury. 7 military officers deliberated for 2 hours. When they returned, the foreman's face said everything. "On the charge of conspiracy to commit sexual assault, how do you find guilty? On the charge of obstruction of justice, guilty. On the charge of abuse of authority, guilty. On the charge of conduct unbecoming an officer, guilty. 4 counts, unanimous verdicts." Merritt's face crumbled, the mask of authority finally shattering to reveal the coward underneath. The sentencing came down hard. 20 years federal prison, dishonorable discharge, total forfeiture of all pay benefits and pension, lifetime prohibition from federal employment or military service. Vane 12 years, Hollister 10 years, Reese 8 years, all dishonorably discharged, all stripped of everything they'd built on the backs of women they'd victimized. When the MPs led Merritt away, he passed within 3 feet of Kira. Their eyes met. "This isn't justice," he hissed. "This is vengeance." Kira's voice was calm, steady, the voice of someone who understood exactly what she'd accomplished and felt no need to defend it. "You're right. It is vengeance. For Sarah Brennan. For Brenna Castellan. For every woman you destroyed. You spent 44 years believing you were untouchable. Now you get to spend 20 years knowing you were wrong." He was gone before he could respond. And Kira felt something release in her chest. Tension she'd been carrying for weeks. Months. Maybe her whole life. Not satisfaction, not happiness. Just relief. It was over. Ghost found her outside the courtroom. Afternoon sun beating down. Desert heat pressing against them both. But somehow it felt lighter than before. "You did it," he said. "We did it. You built the case. I just executed the operation. Stop minimizing what you accomplished." His voice carried the weight of 40 years. "I spent 7 years waiting for this moment. 7 years carrying the guilt of failing my daughter. And when it finally came, when justice finally happened, it was because of you. Because you were brave enough to walk into that corridor and let them come for you. Because you were skilled enough to take them apart in 3 seconds. Because you were determined enough to see this through no matter what it cost." Kira didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. "Sarah wants to meet you." What? My daughter. She saw the trial coverage. She knows what you did. And she wants to meet the woman who finished what she started 7 years ago. Kira felt something shift in her chest. Something she couldn't name. I'd like that. Ghost nodded slowly. Something like peace settling into features that had known nothing but tension for years. There's something else. General Vasquez wants to see you. She has a proposal. What kind of proposal? The kind that changes everything. They walked back toward the admin building. Father and daughter reuniting soon. A predator in chains. 8 victims finally heard. And a 19-year-old Navy SEAL about to learn that justice was only the beginning. General Vasquez waited in the command center. 3 stars on her collar. 30 years of service in her eyes. And something else respect, maybe. The kind that had to be earned. Specialist Thornwood. Sit down. Kira sat. What you accomplished here, the investigation, the takedown, the court-martial, it's going to change military policy. The protocols we're implementing at Fort Resolute are being adopted service-wide. New oversight procedures, anonymous reporting systems, zero-tolerance enforcement. You didn't just stop 3 predators and 1 corrupt officer. You changed the system that created them. That was the goal, ma'am. And you achieved it at 19. Vasquez leaned forward. Which is why I have a proposal. SOCOM is creating a new unit. Specialized intervention team focused on institutional failures, harassment, abuse, corruption within military structures. We need operators who can infiltrate, document, and dismantle these systems. Operators who understand that the worst enemies aren't always overseas. You want me to lead it? I want you to build it from the ground up. Select your own team. Design your own protocols. Answer directly to SOCOM oversight. You'd have authority to investigate any complaint at any base in any branch of service. Complete operational autonomy. Kira felt the weight of that offer settle on her shoulders. Not burden. Responsibility. Why me? You have hundreds of operators with more experience. Experience isn't what we need. We need someone who understands what it's like to be targeted. Someone who knows how predators think because she spent her whole life learning to stop them. Someone who won't be intimidated by rank or politics or institutional pressure. That's you, specialist. You've proven it. Kira thought about her grandmother, her father, Ghost, Sarah Brennan, Zoe Castellan. Every person who'd been failed by a system that was supposed to protect them. Yes. Yes, you'll consider it. Yes, I'll do it. Vasquez smiled. The first smile Kira had seen from her. Good. We start next week. And specialist, one more thing. Ma'am. Colonel Brennan's retirement ceremony is in 3 days. He requested that you attend, front row, because he says you're the proof that 40 years wasn't wasted. Kira felt something tighten in her throat. I'll be there. She stood, saluted, walked toward the door. And for the first time since she'd arrived at Fort Resolute, she felt like the mission was truly complete. Not just the operation. Not just the court-martial. The mission her father had given her when she was 12 years old, standing at his grave, promising that his sacrifice would mean something. The mission her grandmother had given her, teaching her that real strength, protected rather than dominated. The mission Ghost had given her, showing her that patience was a weapon and justice was worth waiting for. That mission was complete, and the next one was just beginning. The retirement ceremony took place 3 days later. Kira arrived early, dress uniform pressed sharp, every medal and ribbon in place. The youngest SEAL in history standing among officers who'd served longer than she'd been alive. But nobody questioned her presence. Not after what she'd done. Ghost stood at the front. Dress blues. 40 years of service condensed into ribbons and citations that couldn't begin to capture what those decades had actually meant. His face carried something Kira hadn't seen before: peace, maybe, or the exhaustion that came after a battle finally ended. Admiral Whitford presided. General Vasquez attended. Dozens of personnel filled the seats men and women Ghost had trained, led, fought beside, saved. And in the front row, a woman Kira had never met but recognized immediately. Sarah Brennan, 30 years old. Civilian clothes now. But she sat with the posture of someone who'd once worn the uniform proudly, who'd been forced to take it off, not because she'd failed, but because the system had failed her. Their eyes met. Sarah nodded once. Small. Acknowledging. Kira nodded back. The speeches began. Admiral Whitford spoke about service and sacrifice. General Vasquez talked about leadership and legacy. Other officers shared memories, training exercises, combat operations, moments when Ghost's decisions had meant the difference between life and death. But when Ghost himself took the podium, he didn't talk about any of that. 40 years, he said. His voice carried across the assembly, steady and strong. I've been asked what I'm most proud of. People expect me to talk about Grenada or Desert Storm or Fallujah, about the operations that made headlines, about the medals and commendations that filled my file. He paused, looked out at the crowd. But that's not what I'm proud of. What I'm proud of are the people I trained who became better than I was. The ones who took every lesson and improved on it. The ones who used what I taught them not for domination, but for protection. His eyes found Kira. 7 years ago, I failed someone. My own daughter. She came to me for help, and I wasn't there. She trusted a system that betrayed her, and I couldn't fix it. I've carried that failure every day since. Every single day. Sarah's hands trembled in her lap, but she didn't look away from her father. 3 weeks ago, that failure was finally addressed. Not by me, by someone I trained. Someone who took everything I taught her and executed it better than I ever could. Someone who walked into a corridor knowing she would be assaulted and let it happen so she could document the predators and dismantle the system that protected them. Ghost's voice cracked, just slightly. Specialist Kira Thornwood is 19 years old, and she accomplished in 4 days what I couldn't accomplish in 7 years. She gave voice to victims who'd been silenced. She delivered justice to predators who'd believed they were untouchable. And she changed a system that had been failing women for decades. He looked at Kira again, then at Sarah, then back at the assembly. That's legacy, not what you do, who you teach, and whether they carry the lessons forward properly. I'm retiring today, but the mission continues, and it's in better hands than mine. He stepped back from the podium. The assembly applauded, and Kira felt something burning in her chest that might have been pride or grief, or both. After the ceremony, Sarah found her. They stood apart from the crowd. 2 women who'd never met but understood each other perfectly. So you're the one, Sarah said. Her voice was quiet, controlled, but something raw underneath. I'm just the one who finished it. Your father built the case. Brenna Castellan provided the evidence. You started it 7 years ago, when you had the courage to file that complaint. Sarah's jaw tightened. Courage, I withdrew that complaint. I let them win. I walked away from everything I'd worked for because I was afraid. You survived. That's not walking away. That's living to fight another day. Is it because for 7 years I've told myself I was a coward? That I should have been stronger? That I should have what destroyed your career even faster been dismissed and isolated and driven out anyway? The system was rigged against you, Sarah. You didn't lose because you weren't strong enough. You lost because the deck was stacked, and nobody dealt you fair cards. Sarah's eyes went wet. She blinked it back. Soldier's reflex. My father says you're 19. Yes. I was 23 when it happened to me. I had 5 years of training and service behind me, and I couldn't do what you did. I couldn't fight back. I had advantages you didn't. I knew what was coming. I planned for it. I had backup staged and documentation ready and a system that would actually listen when I reported what happened. You had none of that. You walked into that office believing the system would protect you, and it betrayed you instead. Kira stepped closer, put her hand on Sarah's arm. What happened to you wasn't your failure. It was theirs. And now they're paying for it. Merritt's in prison. His predators are in prison. The system that protected them is being dismantled because you had the courage to file that complaint 7 years ago, because your story started everything that led to this moment. Sarah's composure cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Not shame anymore. Not regret, relief. I've been waiting 7 years for someone to say that, to tell me it wasn't my fault, that I wasn't crazy or oversensitive or unable to handle military culture. You weren't any of those things. You were right. And now everyone knows it. They stood together as the crowd dispersed, father and daughter reuniting across the lawn. 40 years of service ending. A new chapter beginning. And Kira understood something she hadn't before. Justice wasn't just about punishing the guilty. It was about healing the innocent. Ghost found her an hour later. Most of the crowd had left. The sun was setting. The ceremony officially over. He carried something in his hands, a wooden case worn at the edges old. I have something for you. Kira looked at the case. What is it? Open it. She did. Inside, nestled in faded velvet, lay a knife. K-bar. Military issue. But old, decades old. The grip worn smooth by years of handling. This is from Grenada, Ghost said. 1985. I was 22. We got caught in tunnels under an enemy compound. Close quarters. No room for rifles. Just blades and will and the determination to survive. He took the knife from the case, held it up. This saved my life 6 times. I've carried it for 40 years. Through every deployment, every operation, every moment when things went wrong and precision was the only thing standing between me and death. Why are you giving it to me? Because you've earned it. Not because you need a weapon you're deadly with your bare hands. Because you've earned what it represents. 40 years of service. 40 years of learning that real strength protects rather than preys. 40 years of understanding that patience is a weapon and justice is worth waiting for. He pressed the knife into her hands. Carry it. Remember what it means. And when you train the next generation, because you will pass these lessons forward the way I passed them to you. Kira felt the weight of it. Metal and leather and history compressed into something that fit perfectly in her palm. I don't know if I'm ready. Nobody's ever ready. You just do the work anyway. You make mistakes. You learn from them. You get better. And you never ever stop protecting people who need protecting. She looked at him, this man who'd trained her, believed in her, given her the mission that had changed everything. Thank you. For everything. Don't thank me. Honor it. That's all I ask. He walked away, toward Sarah, toward the family he'd spent 7 years trying to heal. And Kira stood alone with a knife that carried 40 years of legacy and the weight of a future she was only beginning to understand. 6 months later, everything had changed. Kira stood in a training facility at Coronado. Her facility now. Built from the ground up exactly as General Vasquez had promised. The intervention unit. 12 operators. Hand-selected. Trained personally by Kira over 4 months of intensive preparation. and today was their first graduation. "You've completed the hardest training program in military history," Kira told them. Not because the physical demands were extreme, although they were. Not because the tactical challenges were complex, although they were, but because you learned something most operators never understand. She walked among them, looked each one in the eyes. You learned that the worst enemies don't always wear foreign uniforms. Sometimes they wear ours. Sometimes they're protected by systems that should be protecting victims instead. And sometimes the hardest missions aren't the ones that take you overseas, they're the ones that force you to confront rot within your own ranks. She stopped at the front, faced them all. Your job is to find that rot, expose it, eliminate it. Not with rage, not with vengeance, with precision, with patience, with the understanding that justice delivered properly changes systems instead of just punishing individuals. One of the graduates, a young woman 22 who reminded Kira of herself 4 years ago, raised her hand. "Permission to speak, Commander." "Go ahead." What happens when the system pushes back? When politics and connections and institutional pressure try to bury what we find? Kira smiled. Cold. Certain. Then we push harder. We document everything. We build cases so complete that even Pentagon lawyers can't dismiss them. And we remember that every victim we protect, every predator we stop, every system we change, that's what matters. Not whether it's easy, whether it's right. She pulled the Ka-bar from her belt. Ghost's knife. 40 years of legacy. This was given to me by the man who trained me. He carried it for 4 decades. Through Grenada and Desert Storm and Somalia and Fallujah and Afghanistan. It saved his life 6 times, and when he retired, he passed it to me. Not because I needed a weapon, because I'd earned what it represents. She looked at each graduate. Someday, if you earn it, you'll carry something like this. Not the blade itself, the lessons it represents. That real warriors protect. That real strength is precise. That real justice is certain. Commander. Another graduate. Male. 25. Former Marine who'd left his unit after witnessing harassment that command refused to address. What about the victims? The ones who've already been failed? How do we help them? We listen. We believe. We give them the justice they were denied. And we make sure their stories become part of the record that changes everything going forward. She sheathed the knife. You're dismissed. Report to operations at 0600 tomorrow. First assignment briefing. They filed out. 12 operators ready to do what she'd done at Fort Resolute, ready to infiltrate, document, dismantle. But one stayed behind. Zoe Castellan. 21 now. A year older than when Kira had first met her in that barracks. A year stronger. A year further from the victim she'd been, and closer to the warrior she was becoming. Permission to speak privately. Commander. Of course. They walked outside, evening air cooling, the weight of the day settling. I wanted to thank you, Zoe said. For what you did. For believing me when nobody else would. For stopping them. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do. Because when I was in that corridor with them, when Vane had his hands on me, and Merritt was telling me I was crazy, I thought that was it. I thought that was my life now. Being afraid, being silent, being small. Her voice strengthened. And then you showed up. And you let them corner you, and you took them apart in 3 seconds, and for the first time in months I thought maybe I'm not powerless. Maybe there's another way. Maybe strength doesn't mean accepting what happens to you. It means fighting back. Kira saw something in Zoe's eyes. The same fire she'd seen in her own reflection. The same determination that had driven her through SEAL training at 18, through the Fort Resolute operation at 19, through everything that had led to this moment. Is that why you applied for the unit? That's why I survived long enough to apply. What you did, it didn't just stop them. It showed me what was possible. That victims can become operators, that powerlessness can become capability, that the woman who was cornered in that equipment bay can become the woman who corners predators instead. Kira put her hand on Zoe's shoulder. You're going to be better than me. I don't think that's possible. It's inevitable. Because you understand something I had to learn, that being targeted doesn't make you weak. It gives you knowledge. You know how predators think because you've been hunted by them. You know how victims feel because you've been one. That knowledge is power. Use it. Zoe nodded. Slow. Understanding. Commander, one more thing. What? Brenna, my sister. She's applying for reinstatement. After everything that happened, after seeing Merritt go to prison, she finally believes she might have a place in the military again. She wanted me to tell you that. Kira felt something warm spread through her chest. Tell her I'll write the recommendation myself. She was hoping you'd say that. Zoe saluted. Sharp. Precise. The salute of someone who'd earned the right to give it. Then she walked away. Toward the barracks. Toward the future she was building one day at a time. And Kira stood alone, watching the sun set over Coronado, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. Her grandmother, who'd taught her that patience was a weapon. Her father, who'd died believing that honor meant something. Ghost, who'd spent 40 years waiting for justice, and finally found it. Sarah Brennan, who'd been broken by a system, and was finally healing. Brenna and Zoe Castellan sisters, who'd survived different years of the same predation, and were both rebuilding their lives. 8 victims at Fort Resolute, who'd finally been heard. 45 more across Merritt's career, whose stories were finally part of the official record. And a system that was changing slowly, imperfectly, but changing because one 19-year-old had walked into a corridor and let predators corner her so she could document their assault and dismantle their protection. Kira pulled out her phone. Encrypted line. Ghost answered on the second ring. Thornwood. First unit just graduated. 12 operators, ready for deployment. How are they? Better than I was. Hungrier. More determined. They understand what this mission means. Good. Ghost's voice carried warmth. Pride. Sarah told me she's thinking about consulting for your unit, helping design training protocols for handling victim testimony. Kira smiled. She'd be perfect. I told her you'd say that. She's nervous. It's been 7 years since she worked in any military capacity. Then she takes her time. There's no rush. The mission will still be here when she's ready. Silence on the line. Then Ghost's voice, softer now. You know what you've built, don't you? What this unit represents? Tell me. Hope. For every woman who's been silenced and dismissed and told she was crazy for reporting what happened to her. For every victim who thought nobody would ever believe them. Your unit, these operators you're training, they represent the possibility that things can actually change. That speaking up might finally mean something. Kira looked at the knife on her belt. 40 years of legacy. 40 years of lessons about patience and justice and protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. That's the mission, Ghost. Not just stopping predators. Creating a world where predators can't operate. Where systems protect victims instead of silencing them. Where women in uniform don't have to choose between careers and safety. That's a big mission. Then it's a good thing I have 40 years to work on it. She heard Ghost laugh. The first real laugh she'd heard from him in months. You're going to be better than me. Everybody keeps saying that. Because it's true. And because that's how it should be. The student surpassing the teacher, the next generation building on what came before. That's legacy, Kira. That's what all those years of service actually mean. The call ended. Kira stood alone as darkness settled over Coronado, as the first stars appeared, as another day ended and another mission waited to begin. She thought about that corridor at Fort Resolute, about 3 predators who'd believed they were untouchable, about the look on Vane's face when he'd realized the woman he'd cornered was a Navy SEAL, about Merritt in chains finally paying for 44 years of protecting monsters. She thought about Sarah Brennan's tears, about Zoe Castellan's determination, about Brenna Castellan's 5-year vigil holding on to evidence and believing that someday it would matter. And she thought about her father, Marcus Thornwood, Force Recon Marine, who'd died in Fallujah when she was 12, who'd taught her that real warriors don't prey on the weak, they protect them, who'd given her a mission that day at his grave that she'd spent every moment since trying to honor. The mission was finally clear, not just stopping predators one at a time, building a force that would stop them forever, training the next generation, and the generation after that, creating a legacy that would outlast her, outlast Ghost, outlast everyone who'd built it. A legacy of protection, of justice, of hope. Kira touched the Ka bar at her belt one last time, felt the weight of 40 years, felt the responsibility of 40 more. Then she walked back inside. Because the mission never ended. The mission just evolved. And somewhere out there in bases and barracks and corridors where cameras didn't reach predators were still operating, still believing they were untouchable, still destroying lives while systems looked the other way. They were wrong. Because Specialist Kira Thornwood was building something they'd never seen before, a force dedicated to hunting them, exposing them, eliminating them, not with rage, with precision, not with vengeance, with justice. And when the next predator cornered the next victim in the next dark corridor, when he smiled that cold, patient smile and reached for her uniform, when he believed that silence meant submission and isolation meant vulnerability, and the system would protect him forever, he would learn what the ones at Fort Resolute had learned, that the quiet ones are always the most dangerous, that patience is a weapon, that justice, when it finally comes, arrives in the time it takes to draw 3 breaths, and that some women, the ones who've been underestimated their whole lives, the ones who've been told they don't belong, the ones who've turned their pain into purpose and their silence into strategy, those women don't just survive, they fight back, they win, and they change the world.